The way this is presented in Malto is not all of the jail poem, every single stanza of it, although they're all pretty magnificent, if you ask me. But let's just go stanza by stanza from the very first. Any thoughts to start off with? Because I have questions if there are no thoughts.
This has been my single-pointed focus this week. I haven't even looked at any of the other poems. I have been with this poem every day.
It's worthy of it.
And when I'm going around in my day, I've been thinking about it. And actually in that first one, in a universe of cells, who is not in jail and jailers. So that whole concept of cells.
Well, exactly, because a cell has a cell wall, and we're all made of little cells.
Yeah, and the question I wonder about that is why? Because I started thinking about our minds and how our thoughts go and how you move throughout your day from one thing to the next. So like in the morning, just this morning I was doing it, sort of compartmentalizing. Mm-hmm. So I wake up and I work for a couple hours, and then I have to go talk to my husband about the house, and each one of these things is its own separate block, but you're kind of running through all of them throughout your day. Mm-hmm. So while the cell can have that ordered kind of routine and pattern that's really helpful, when you separate everything, it's not real, because even when I'm in the house talking to my husband about our house or whatever, there's other things that are going through.
Things like your son.
Yeah, like my son will go by, or the phone will ring, or something will pop up on my email, or whatever it is that will make me, and then I go, where am I actually right now?
What is the thread?
Am I in a compartment of this specific activity, or am I in all of these things are going on, but this is just the one thing I'm focused on right now?
Well, not to jump ahead, but I do want to jump ahead to what you're saying is we really start to see that in the seventh one, where he says, someone who I am is no one, someone I've done is nothing, someplace I have been is nowhere. And that speaks very deeply to what you're saying here, which is the sense of identity and self. And identity is a cell.
I have a little trouble with that interpretation. I think he's more anti-cell, and he's not seeing cells as forms and these are cells. It's very episodic. I see, why are they divided up in little bits like that? He's in jail, and he's probably writing these thoughts as they come to him on scraps of paper, on toilet paper or whatever he can get his hands on, and they're little bits. He doesn't have time to put together a big thing. But I think his spirit and the repeating of beatnik as the last word in many of these things, is very much against the idea of cells and enclosures and jails and specifically. And I'm not sure that I would see it structured as, we need a certain kind of form is what he's getting at. It doesn't ring true to me.
Well, okay, use that then to discuss the second line as well, because then when you go into a world of hospitals, who's not sick? Doctors. So I think you're right that there's a definite feeling that there is some overseer who doesn't have to participate in what else is going on.
Yeah.
And that certainly talks about a power imbalance. I mean, I think we could call it a power imbalance at the very least.
By the end of that, of course it's the third one, not the first one, but you identify with him, you're on his side, but you also know that he sees things differently. And he's going to be categorized as someone with mental health issues. Now, we know this. We know about God. He's going to be talking about things. People are just going to think that is too strange. Something wrong with you. Yeah. So you know why he's in jail, sort of, you don't know exactly why he's in jail, but you have a kind of an idea.
You definitely do. And I like what you say. With one stanza, and you're right. It isn't the first. We have a sense of him already. And let me hold back a little bit, just because. I really do think this is Bob Kaufman's voice, but I also always so hesitant to immediately say that the narrator of the poem is the poet himself, because this could be also an amalgamation of people he's met, sentiments they've had, conversations they've had, even though this particular poem, when I read it, I really think I'm inside his head along with the golden sardine. But also that line, jazz and jails and God. Jazz and jails, just, you won't know the J word. I mean, he's a writer, he knows that. and then he ends up with God.
I don't want another J word.
You know?
Jazz and jails is enough to deal with.
Then how does God fit in? Tell me about that. Do you like it?
Well, God doesn't fit in anywhere anyway. Jazz is supreme. It's, godly. Jails is the other side of God, and then there's God. Whatever you want to make of that.
Well, I like that a lot because there's definitely, I use this term loosely, a theology in these series. And we'll get further into some of that. But this whole idea of seeking for an answer, and that's where sometimes organized religion comes in and sometimes where it doesn't, but this whole idea of seeking something. And he really is seeking. Clearly he's seeking.
Well, that's why he says we know some things.
Right.
Only
Right.
some.
Why is Saturday a good day to go to jail? Saturday is a terrible day to go to jail because no one's going to arraign you until Monday at the earliest, and you're stuck in jail. Unless, and the only unless I could come up with, and I don't think it's necessarily right, is if you have nowhere else to be, you have nowhere else to live, Saturday's a good day to go to jail. You get your meals, you get a place to sleep.
But what's interesting about the Saturday thing, too, is that he's aware of the day of the week. If you're living on the streets and you're sort of like, you would lose track if he doesn't have a job, I'm assuming, and he's kind of wandering around, and I think he would lose track. So it's interesting that he would put in like a very finite time and space.
It's a very specific...
In that, sort of free, open navigation of being on the streets for most of his time.
You're right, it's intensely specific.
And then he knows that he would be in jail on a Saturday. So if he was, not aware of that, he would just keep walking around, you know what I mean? Keep kind of...
Saturday's
would
also a
be
good
in-
day for jazz.
And God.
If you're Jewish, Saturday's also a good day for God.
What I get from all of these little snippets is that he's an observer. He's sitting there, he's in this confined place, but he's observing everything around him. All these other people coming and going, how the rhythm of the place is organized via Saturday. He's almost as if he sees the jazz improvisation of people coming. This one, the guy that's hanging over the toilet bowl.
It's a place he's used to.
Yeah.
Right? This is not his first time in jail.
Right.
So let's go to the next stanza, the 4. Now they give a new form, quivering, jelly-like. And this is where we start to the language starts to get very interesting. That proves any boy can be president of Muscatel. They are mad at him because he's one of them.
And I would assume this is the police who have just arrested a white boy.
I mean, this is where it gets very...
And his gray speckled white nakedness, stinking fingers grasping the toilet bowl.
You see, in number...
What an image.
Yeah.
And they're one after each other, but number 3 is actually very gentle in a way. It has a linear aspect to it. It's not alinear. And then this one, he starts to go all in.
This is the one I like the best.
I'm not surprised by that, Pat. But
Now, Mr. America
they
wants
give a
to
new
date.
form. What is they? Is that, are we going to go metapoetic? Is that poetry? Is that...
Who, they are mad at him because he's one of them?
That's another day. Is it the same day?
Which day are you?
Well, the first day. Now they give a new form, quivering, jelly-like.
I see.
Now they give you a new form.
Or that he's in the cell and they've just thrown somebody in there with him.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's kind of what I
Yeah.
got.
So you have-
He's like a heap of jelly. They're just...
The guard.
well then isn't it, then what do we think about that word give? That makes it really interesting. I'll say that, yes. So let's say they are the jailers and they give a new form into that. So they're quivering jelly-like.
I thought that was the people, like the inmates coming in, because what a bum just used to be kind of, okay, I'm just hanging out. It wasn't necessarily a drunk person. It wasn't necessarily a crazy person. But now you got someone who's a whole nother game. He's quivering like jelly. What is he, high? What's wrong with him?
But isn't it interesting? He's almost scientific about it. right? Like he's apart from that. There's a new form, and he's very specifically not naming anything, and then he gets very namey. That's the technical term. He gets very referential. Maybe I should use better language, Meredith. But yes, he gets very referential, but he's really not referential in the beginning. It's an amoeba of sorts.
Yeah.
Paramecia? Amoeba? I forget. That proves any boy can be president of Muscatel. So,
It's a white book.
yeah. Any boy can be president of Muscatel.
And then anybody can drink and get drunk and be
Thrown
quivering
in jail.
jelly-like amoeba thrown into the cell.
So he's somebody who doesn't necessarily come to jail often, this new form. But
Yeah.
yes, and it would be a Saturday, and if we get really crazy, they'll take us out of here and we'll go to jail. It would be perfect.
Mr. America wants to bathe.
Yeah.
He's
vomit all over him.
being sharp, but then he says, "What am I doing feeling compassion?" When he comes out of it, he will help kill me. He probably hates beatniks. So, and we see this again and again, but Eric brought it up earlier. He really identifies with the beatniks. I don't know if the beatniks identified with him, but he identified with the beatniks.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we go to number 7, which for me is one of my very favorite stanzas.
Well, if you're strictly thinking about jail, that's kind of all the ways that you become either institutionalized or just the jail or people. They take away who you are individually, and who are you now?
You become non-referential.
Well, this is I've been having like multiple conversations on this. The idea of the loss of identity, and what you just said made me look at it even a little bit differently, is that some of the other poets, and I was pulling out a Sid Corman poem, Emily Dickinson, I Am Nobody, Who Are You, and another Pessoa, somebody just posted something like I Am Nothing, so this is a theme in some poets' works, and that loss of identity. But what was bugging me about this one was that those were all choices where you are choosing to sort of shed your identity for some reason. You're sort of
In a Siddhartha type of way.
right, where you're saying
saying,
I'm here, but I'm going to be very poetic, and I'm going to not be here. I am nobody. Who are you? Can see Emily Dickinson look quiet. She's safe. She's at home. She can write this in her little attic. But he was
she had some
definitely
power
not.
in that. She had some power. Saying,
That's
in her
right.
case, she had a power of I am no one. Who are you? Nobody. Who are you?
Right.
But it's her
Victoria
self-determination.
just said was about being robbed of your identity.
I don't know about anyone else, but many people, you don't have to be in jail, emotionally or psychologically, to walk around feeling like you're no one.
Right.
And you've done nothing.
Exactly.
And as far as, this goes to that program I saw, the men it's unbelievable. They are no one. They can barely, some of them are intelligent and are sitting there. But a lot of them, they can barely talk. They can barely make themselves understood. They're like nothing.
And they wouldn't even have the language
Under.
to tell the story that where people might be able to
Well,
hear
they tell
that.
some stories of of their backgrounds, and your mouth is like gaping. No parents or a father that shows up once in a while when he does something wrong and beats him up. A young boy growing up with a grandmother, what can she do? How can she stop him from doing whatever he wants to do? But really, and some of them, there was a 14-year-old boy who had actually done well in school. He could barely talk. They put him in a boot camp. Boot camp is good, but for a 14-year-old boy, so he didn't make it. But they're nobodier than nobody. What can I say? And this is just, to me, I read poetry very emotionally, and I get it. something
it's
I've
like
done
being
is nothing.
dehumanized,
Someplace I've been
being
is
dehumanized.
nowhere.
It's
You come from nowhere.
to Patty's point, it is a great amount of dehumanization. And I like the way he switches. What are the answers I must find questions for? And that goes back to something earlier when he talks about knowing some things, and then this whole idea of God and having kind of more of a knowledge about things. So he's saying he has some answers. But if you have answers and you don't know what they're the answers to what questions, are those answers useful?
Right.
So and also you get to see him kind of, again, you see him coming at things from a different perspective. He's living in a life where he has a perspective that is not the same as the way people look at the world. He's coming with the answers first, which is kind of very profound to me. All of these strange streets I must find cities for. Thank God for the beatniks. So it seems that through the beatniks,
He found a place that he can
could
reside
rest.
and exist.
he could
and
exist there.
Who he is, whatever he is. you know.
Exactly. And again, I'm curious to what you all think. I don't think he necessarily is saying he totally belongs within beatniks, but he has perhaps a comfortable home with them.
Well, he has to have some anchor, right? Maybe
Yeah.
that's his
And
anchor.
in San Francisco, that's his anchor. So, okay, this is a tougher one, although it's actually very funny. One day Adolf Hitler had nothing to do. All the Jews were burned, artists all destroyed. Adolf Hitler was very bored, even with Ava. So he moved to San Francisco, became an ordinary policeman. Ouch. Devoted himself to stamping out beatniks. There's a real ouch at the end of that. Although the beginning is it's kind of amusing. It's like, what if he had nothing left to do? If Adolf Hitler had nothing left to do.
So he'd come to the next place where there was this sort of anti-establishment.
But that's a very
Philosophy
strong
going on,
analogy.
you
Isn't
know?
that a very, very strong analogy to make between police officers and Hitler? I'm not saying it's right or
and
wrong,
not
but it's
just
just
a police officer, but an ordinary policeman. So he would go from the
Exactly.
most well-known, horrific name you could ever think of to just an ordinary policeman, but they do the same thing. So now he's anonymous, but he can kind of get away with it. He wouldn't be vilified as most of the world has done to
because
him.
he stood out
He stood
as
out.
Hitler before. Now he's just
Now
one
he's
of
just,
many.
he can mix in right into the
He's
something
now-
that's
and then also
somehow acceptable.
so he's also equating the beatniks with the Jews and the artists. He's equating the police with any policeman with Adolf Hitler. He's, in a way, that part for me really shows that he's uncowed.
Yes, exactly.
He hasn't given up. You know, they can try everything they want to try. They can bring Adolf Hitler in to be his jailer, and he's still not gonna. This had to be even stronger when you think of the context of when it was written, 20 years after the war. I mean, even now, when you say Adolf Hitler, people just kind of, that's it's a big deal if you're going to compare somebody to Hitler. But in 20 years ago, that had to be, to compare a regular police officer to Hitler was huge. So, I mean, the context matters.
He's got there's some irony behind the lines, so
It's amusing the way he
some
says it.
amusing, yeah, because, I mean, you just say Adolf Hitler, how can you, it's impossible to deal with, and so the irony,
Makes it more palatable. Yeah.
I
agree
mean,
with
what
you.
are you going to do? You have to make a joke. It's
But we're back to the
too
beatniks
horrible
again.
to think of.
So it's again back to so what's he doing? This is where we get very small and small and small. Sitting here writing things on paper instead of sticking the pencil into the air. So imagine, do you stick it like this into the air? Do you stick
I
it
would
like this
picture
into
it
the air?
like this.
Because that matters.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
you
if you're-
protest? So my imagery was like when you stick a placard in the air and you're saying, no more war or whatever, and maybe this is all he has. This is his protest sign.
He's still making it. I think he's trying to say, I'm still here. It's like because I'm
Definitely.
doing something. I'm putting something down. I'm not just like, woo!
Well, definitely go
With the pencil in hand.
read this one because I think you're right about I'm still here. It's like from Follies, good times and bad. Yeah. But
Caught in imaginary webs of conscience, I weep over my acts, yet believe.
so I'm still here.
Imaginary
But there's
webs of
imaginary webs of conscience.
But that's where he's caught.
Which is another prison analogy.
Webs.
Well, that goes back to why am I sympathizing with this guy
Yeah.
who
Who in the real world would probably oppress me too, because he's one of them, right? That we automatically assumed he's a white boy on Muscatel, which I have a hard time believing, but okay. But he's certainly a new form that doesn't typically go to jail. And he's realizing this form would probably spit on him if he was in the street. So why am I feeling So maybe the web of conscious is where he's wasting his energy instead of that whole point of identity that you brought up, Meredith.
Or maybe he's believing in his imaginary acts because he's in jail and he only has his imagination, and that he believes in his consciousness and what he can imagine.
Also,
Yes.
he also believes in the freedom to act, the freedom to do what you want to
To
do.
raise the pencil.
Yeah, even though there might be some acts that he later regrets.
It's a very tragic next stanza. The defective on the floor mumbling was once a man who shadowed across the table. It's hard not to think that's him. But any other ways of looking at it?
Well, the guy, we don't know anything about this. We're assuming it's a white guy who's in drunk. What if,
Yeah, no,
I was
we're making
thinking
that
like a
assumption,
lawyer.
right?
Like, what if he's a lawyer? He just got fired. He had a bad day. He's on the wrong side of town.
Maybe he's talking about the new form that came in.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, okay.
On the last one. The last one's gorgeous. Come, help flatten a raindrop. I would love to hear what anyone has to say about that. And first of all, that's the one that comes right after the defective. I mean, talk about not necessarily connecting, but come, help flatten a raindrop. It's a beautiful image. I mean, just that alone, it's about as poetic as anything here is.
Well, it feels like an invitation a little bit to the reader to come in and investigate whatever this is. And I don't know. Maybe somebody else has the flatten a raindrop part, but
What could the raindrop be?
Oh, I think it's just I just think it's a surrealist image also, and it's something that doesn't happen in jails, right? There's all sorts of stuff in your jail cell, but
But it's not
it's not
raindrops.
going to rain in jail, so it gives you a vision of the outside again. But also, but interesting, like why do you need more than one person? Like we need all these people, and it's one little raindrop. It's just it's his beatnik,
well, I love that because I feel like
It's
we're
outside,
like
isn't it?
those people.
Yeah.
And I also think it's like a Zen thing because I don't think you can flatten a raindrop.
It's like a koan.
It is a koan. So that it's
Koan.
it's very beatniky.
Well, I wonder though the raindrop is one item, maybe he's.
It's an
like,
entity.
Each one of us is our own. It's like if you went into like one of those Zen things too. A raindrop, if it falls into the ocean, it gets absorbed
Back to
into
the
the whole
cell.
ocean, so it all goes back to source.
Back to the cell again.
Right.
But
Maybe like what you were saying, kind of like you're spreading it out, like even connecting to each other. If each one is the separate one and you're going to flatten it, you're going to kind of,
Yeah, we would
Add it
all
to
become
everyone.
part of the same puddle.
yeah.
and you're no longer an individual entity. You're part of a larger movement. I don't know why, but that last thing, I keep thinking it refers also a little bit to the whole beatnik movement. I don't know why. I don't have a good reason for it, but it feels that whole come. Let's do something together. But what do the beats mean to each of us?
They say things a new way. It's not that nice, classical, pretty thing. It's meandering. It's more like speech.
Is it more natural? Is it a
Yes.
natural thing?
Well, yeah, it's like he's giving you every angle for those people who need real specific visual things to attach to, and then other people who are more like you hear one line and you just dwell on it, because I'm kind of like that. I'm more like if I have one sentence to walk around with all day, I'll do that. Whereas I get kind of lost in but I like it because it gives you the sense of rhythm and the noise and the up and down and the back and forth, but it's not quite as, like my mind doesn't it does attach to it, but in a very different way.
It's funny because just occurred to me that when you said, what is a beatnik? I always think of the beatniks as being those who first rebelled because they were before the hippies. And I think this line he's saying, he's inviting you to become maybe more like himself, a beatnik. Like up at the top, he mentions the beatniks that's being stomped out and someone who's quite defective on the floor, mumbling. Maybe he's mumbling.
He's the one who's mumbling these things to some extent too, right?
Maybe he's inviting us to
And
be
it's
more
a gentle
like the beatnik.
invitation, isn't it?
And they're more poetic, so maybe he's just trying to show you, like, look, we're into poetics, and this is what I'd like you all to come and be with me.
I like that a lot, Pamela, because it's so much of this is either a little, it's stronger worded. Certainly the whole Adolf Hitler thing is very strongly worded, but by the end of it, it's a very gentle invitation. You know, the whole idea of just come and then help. That's, help is not, it's a very kind of a beautiful ending. Do we feel, going back to something Eric started saying, do we feel that at the end he is downtrodden, or not? I mean, is it a hopeful ending or a depressing ending?
Hopeful. He's writing. He's not sticking the pencil in the air. He's making invitations. He's yet believe.
That's kind of amazing, isn't it, when you think about the topic of it, is that here we are at the end, and I think we're all agreeing that there's a certain hope in there and a certain beauty.
And it's such a hot kind of invitation. I mean, I think, I would never...
Would you say
like
no
if
to
I was,
someone?
If I was... No, I mean, but it's like you want to invite somebody to a party, I'm thinking, come help find a ring wrap.
If someone asked you to come help find
He's
the ring,
inviting
you
you to his imagination.
wouldn't say no. Yeah, it's an answer. Who would say no to this?
Did you see him at the gate of the
nice
party, like the
invitation.
bouncer, and saying, and he says, what's your password? I'm here to flatten the rain.
It's great. It's really is.
You can
whatever
come in.
it is.
So, Muscatel in 2 weeks, and I will try to find a raindrop for us to flatten right here in the New York Public Library. But thank you very much.